The wind tasted of copper and drought as Silas Creed stood at the edge of his withering ranch, watching the horizon with eyes as hollow as the gulch behind the barn. Dust lifted off the earth like prayer smoke, casting the plains in a soft red haze. The soil beneath his boots cracked like old bone. 30 years he'd carved this place from wilderness, and still it never called him kin. His horse shifted beneath him, sensing the ride ahead. Town was 6 miles west and held nothing but trouble, yet he saddled up all the same. There were debts to settle, not the kind you pay with coin, but with action. A man with no one left to bury doesn't always ride for justice. Sometimes he rides to feel the weight of something, even if it ain't his. The town of Bristlehook had never been clean, but today it stank different. The summer heat hung like a fever, thick with sweat and something fouler. Like hope, rotted at the stem. Folks lined the dusty square not for cattle or hogs, but for flesh. Human flesh. A widow and her 5 sons, set for auction like they were farm stock or rusted tools. The sheriff leaned against a post chewing tobacco, watching it all with shrug and a glass eye. They called her the Black Widow, though her skin was the color of riverbank earth, and her eyes carried stormlight. She stood barefoot on a wagon block, spine straight, face unreadable. Her boys flanked her, 5 in a line, brown-skinned and silent, their clothes too thin, their stares too old. The eldest was a rail-thin boy with stone in his jaw. The youngest, barely walking, clung to the hem of her torn skirt, like a barnacle to a drowning ship. The crowd murmured like vultures circling a half-dead steer. One man laughed loud enough to make the smallest child flinch. Another spat in the dirt and made a bid. No names were asked. No pass required. Just numbers shouted like curses. One by one, the buyers came forward, some for labor, others for less noble reasons. Silas watched from the shade of the general store's awning, a matchstick unlit between his teeth. He didn't plan to step forward. Not until the youngest boy tripped on his own feet and hit the wagon bed hard. The thud echoed like a pistol crack. The widow didn't cry out, just knelt and lifted the child slow, as if pain was an old, familiar neighbor. She whispered something to him no one else heard. That was when Silas moved, not with purpose, not with righteousness. Just something between rage and pity twisted deep in his gut, like an old root tugging at his soul. $100, he said. The auctioneer blinked. For the lot. For all of them, Silas said, voice like gravel, mother included. A hush fell. A bird flapped up from the rafters of the saloon roof, startled by the silence. Then laughter, ugly, bitter, broke out from behind him. You planning to run a nigger orphanage now, Creed? Someone spat. Silas didn't turn. No, he said. Planning to fix my fences. Maybe raise some dam help. The money changed hands. No one clapped. The sheriff watched with his one good eye, didn't say a word. Naomi Bell didn't thank him, didn't speak at all. She lifted her chin, gathered her sons, and stepped down from the platform like a queen descending from some broken throne. They rode out an hour later. Silas gave him the wagon and walked beside his horse. The eldest boy sat in the back, arms crossed, watching him with a look too sharp for his age. The others were quiet save the baby, who whimpered until his mother began humming low. Some song no white man knew. It sounded older than sorrow. By dusk, they reached the ranch. The wind came in off the east hills, carrying the dry scent of juniper and the brittle promise of rain. Silas led them to the barn. It had one good cot and a pile of hay that didn't stink too bad. I'll bring blankets, he said. Naomi met his eyes for the first time. We'll manage. He nodded once. She carried herself like she expected the world to betray her at any moment. He understood that gait. That night, the house felt too big again. Silas sat by the cold hearth, hat in his lap, staring at nothing. The walls groaned in the wind. Every so often he thought he heard footsteps, but it was just memory kicking up dust in his mind. Years ago, a child's laugh had echoed through these halls. A girl with her mother's curls and a stubborn will. Fever took them both in 1 week. No one survived long out here unless the land chose them. It hadn't chosen Silas. It just hadn't buried him yet. Out in the barn, Naomi lay with her sons curled around her like stones in a riverbed. She didn't sleep. Her ears stayed sharp for danger, for betrayal. Her hands didn't tremble when she held her youngest. She wasn't afraid, just tired in a way bones remember. The eldest, Moses, sat near the barn doors, whittling with a broken knife he'd stolen years ago. His mother had told him to stay awake tonight, not for wolves or coyotes, but men, always men. He watched the house from the cracks in the boards. The man who bought them wasn't cruel, not yet. But kindness was a mask, and Moses had seen enough masks rot in the rain. Still, something in the man's eyes unsettled him. Not hatred, not lust, just grief, raw and quiet. The knife slipped, nicked his thumb. He wiped the blood on his trousers and whispered to himself, "Ain't no such thing as good men." Inside, Silas finally lit the match and touched it to the cold hearth. The flame flickered, uncertain, then caught. For the first time in years, the fire stayed. Mornings came harder now. The sun rose late behind a veil of dust and smoke, and the crows circled lower over the fields like omens with wings. Silas Creed woke before the light, as he always did, but now he wasn't alone in the silence. He could hear soft footfalls in the yard, bare feet over hard earth, a spade digging quietly near the side fence, a rusted pan scraping ash from a fire pit. Naomi Bell worked like the land owed her something. Maybe it did. She tended the chores without speaking unless necessary, always with her jaw tight, shoulders braced for insult or blow. Her boys moved in a strange rhythm around her, like a flock that had forgotten how to trust the sky. The eldest, Moses, didn't say much, but when he looked at Silas, there was thought behind the quiet. Something calculating. The boy knew tools. He sharpened blades, mended the water pump, set fence posts straight with a mason's eye. Silas had hired grown men with less grit. The second boy, Ezra, liked to sing when he worked. Soft spirituals that floated over the wind like memory. The twins, Jeb and Jonah, always kept close to each other, half feral in their silence, eyes dark and watchful. The youngest, Micah, still toddled, still clung to Naomi's skirts, but he begun toddling towards Silas now too, small hands reaching for something he didn't yet understand. It unsettled Silas more than he'd admit. They shared the land, but not the house. Not yet. Naomi and the boys still slept in the barn, though Silas had offered to sell her room once, gruffly, like it pained him to say it. She declined with a nod. Barn's fine. I prefer walls that don't pretend kindness. He didn't press. The town whispered about them within a week. Silas heard at the feed store, in the silence between the clink of nails and the slide of flour sacks. One man muttered, "Creed's gone soft," while another asked if Silas was building himself a breeding herd. The sheriff stopped by the ranch one afternoon, chewing on a toothpick and spitting lies dressed up as concern. "Folks don't take kindly to you bringing that situation onto your land," he said, gesturing vaguely toward the horizon. Silas didn't look up from his axe. "Ain't a skin, Em, to like it." "She got a pass," the sheriff added, "one that might find its way here. Don't we all?" That was the end of it, at least on the porch. Inside himself, though, Silas felt the slow stirring of something heavier, a tightness in the chest he hadn't known in years. He didn't like being watched, and the world was watching now, waiting to see if he'd fall with her weight on his back. But weight had never been the problem. Silence was. One evening, Naomi found him working late on the corral post. He was tightening a bent rail, fingers raw and bleeding from a slipped nail. She walked up, arms folded, and said flatly, "You knew what this would cost." Silas didn't answer. She stared at his hands a long moment. Then, "Why us?" He didn't look at her, just said, "Because no one else did." "And you? You don't care what we did to survive." "No, you should." There was a long silence, cracked only by the wind. Naomi turned to leave, but paused. "You ever had to kill a man who thought he owned you?" "No, just ones who thought they owned the world." She didn't respond, but her breath shifted, quieter, less guarded. She walked away without looking back. Later that night, storm clouds rolled in heavy and black, the kind that made dogs whimper and cattle press against the fence line. Lightning split the sky like bone. Sometime past midnight, one of the twins, Jonah, vanished. Naomi's scream cut the dark clean in two. The barn doors were open. A small pair of footprints led toward the river. The whole ranch jolted awake. Moses took a lantern and ran without being told. Silas followed, rifle slung across his shoulder, boots pounding soaked earth. Thunder cracked. Trees thrashed in the wind. They found Jonah curled beneath a lightning-charred tree, eyes wide but dry. He wasn't crying, just staring up like the sky had spoken a truth only he could hear. Silas reached him first. The boy flinched at his hand, then stilled as the rancher wrapped his coat around him. Moses crouched beside them, face pale with fear and fury. "You ain't supposed to leave," he whispered to his brother. "You hear me? You don't get to leave." They didn't talk on the walk back, but Moses held the lantern higher, and Jonah didn't try to run again. At the barn, Naomi took her son without a word. She looked at Silas for the first time that night. Not with thanks, but something more dangerous. Trust, maybe, or the beginning of it. The next morning, Naomi cooked. Proper breakfast, cornmeal, salt pork, coffee boiled strong and bitter. She didn't ask them to eat with her and the boys, but she didn't stop them, either. Silas sat at the table like a man, unsure whether he belonged. The boys ate like wolves. Ezra hummed under his breath. Moses kept glancing between Naomi and Silas, something working itself out behind his eyes. When the meal ended, the quiet lingered like fog. Ezra asked, "You ever shoot anybody, Mr. Creed?" Silas drank his coffee slow. Once or twice. "What for?" "For being what they were." That seemed to satisfy the boy. Moses asked nothing, but as he stood, he said softly, "You fix a fence good." Silas blinked. "You helped." Moses nodded. "Still, looks better now." Outside, the sky was clearing. The storm had left the earth cleaner, the air sharp with ozone and fresh dirt, the kind of morning that almost made the land feel forgiving. Silas watched the boys scatter back to their chores. Naomi lingered near the door, arms crossed, mouth half smiling. "You're a strange man, Silas Creed. I ain't the only one." She stepped down into the yard without another word. From the roof, a crow cawed once and flew east into the sun. Summer bled slow over the plains, and the land drank what little it could. The creek behind Silas Creed's barn dried to a whisper, but the house, quiet as it was, had begun to hold laughter like it used to hold ghosts. Ezra sang louder now while hauling buckets. The twins stopped flinching when Silas passed too close. Even Naomi, proud and ever vigilant, let the boys eat on the porch some evenings, their bare feet swinging like saplings in the wind. Moses had grown in the silence between days, taller, stronger, more certain. He asked fewer questions and started giving orders to his brothers with a voice that carried. Silas watched him one morning from the window, saw the boy lift the same fence post he himself had struggled with weeks before. It stirred something in his chest, half pride, half fear. But peace, even the kind you earn, never lingers in the West. The man arrived just past midday, riding a dun mare with a hollow-eyed look and a rifle strapped to the saddle like a broken promise. He wore a wide-brim hat pulled low and a coat heavy with dust and blood memories. When he dismounted, he moved with the ease of someone who'd killed before and didn't regret it. Silas stepped off the porch with his hand near the revolver at his belt. The man stopped 10 paces short and nodded. "Creed," he said, voice like gravel soaked in whiskey. "Name yours." "Cole Strickland." That name settled into the dirt like ash. He held up a folded paper. "Got myself a warrant. Name on it's Naomi Bell." Silas didn't take it. "Ain't no law out here that writes her name." "Don't need law," Strickland said, eyes flicking toward the barn. "Got cause. I was kin to her husband. The last one. Man died in a fire. He fall into it?" Silas asked coldly. Strickland smiled, wolf-like. "After she crushed his skull with a fire iron. Yeah, kid saw the whole thing. I heard. The little one." Silas's jaw tightened. "You want to ride off now, I won't stop you. And if I don't, then I bury you beside the horse." Strickland didn't blink, but he didn't push either. Just nodded once and walked his mare to the edge of the property. where the land met shadow. "I'll be back come dusk," he said. "And if she ain't in my saddle, I'll take the whole place down around her." When he was gone, Silas walked to the barn, heart thumping a beat older than fear. Naomi stood by the door, already waiting. "You knew he'd come," he said. "I didn't know which one," she answered. "But someone always comes." "He has a paper." "Doesn't matter." "Did you do it?" he asked. Her eyes didn't falter. "Yes." He was choking Micah. "Broke 3 of his ribs. I hit him once. Just once. But it was enough." Silas exhaled. "Moses saw. He helped me bury him." That night, the wind turned hot. The smell of gun oil carried on it, sharp and certain. Silas cleaned his rifle at the table. Naomi sharpened a skinning knife. The boys sensed a shift. Moses posted himself at the barn window with Ezra. The twins dug out the slingshot from under the cot. Even Micah stayed quiet, holding his mother's hand like it was the last solid thing in the world. Silas showed Moses how to load the Winchester. The boy listened without blinking, fingers steady. "You ever shoot?" Silas asked. "Only once." Moses said, "Rabbit. It screamed like a person." "You sure about this?" "No," the boy said, "but I'm here." Before dawn, they saw a torchlight on the hill. 6 riders. Strickland among them, wearing a coat that flared like a preacher's vestment. "Don't fire unless they cross the fence," Silas said. Naomi stood beside him. "They will." And they did. The first shot came from Ezra, wild but loud enough to split the air. The second came from Moses, and it found a shoulder. One rider screamed and fell. They answered with fire. The outer barn caught first, then the hay shed. The twins screamed as embers leapt to the sky. Silas held the gate, rifle kicking against his shoulder. Naomi moved like a windstorm, silent, fast, lethal. She gutted one rider with her knife, then dragged her bleeding arm across her dress without flinching. Strickland found Silas near the house, both of them panting in smoke. "You want to die for her?" he shouted, raising his pistol. Silas fired first. The bullet grazed Strickland's side, spun him backward. He dropped behind the water trough. More shots, more shouting. Then quiet. Silas staggered back toward the porch, blood dripping from a wound in his thigh. Moses caught him, eyes wide. "You're hit. Ain't dead." From the flames, Naomi emerged, soot on her face, dress torn. She looked at Silas, then at Moses. Her voice cracked but didn't break. "You two hold the porch. I'll check the barn." She vanished before argument could reach her. Minutes passed. The smoke thinned. The shooting stopped. From the far edge of the field came a whimper. Jonah limped from the dark, his twin beside him, holding a bloody rock. They had fought. Somehow they had survived. Silas leaned against the porch post, breath shallow, pain flashing behind his eyes. Moses crouched beside him, hands bloody. "You all right, Pa?" Silas looked at him. The word hit harder than the bullet. "Yeah," he said. "I'm all right." The boy nodded, silent. From the barn, Naomi returned with Micah in her arms. Behind her, flames flickered but hadn't won. The land was scarred, the house blackened, but they were alive, together, and that mattered more than blood ever had. Dawn came slower than usual, as if the sun itself was reluctant to rise over so much ruin. Smoke clung to the edges of the ranch like a bad memory, curling from blackened timbers and scorched earth. The barn still stood, half-charred but defiant. The outer sheds were gone. The front porch bore the ghosts of bullet holes and blood, but the house itself, though battered, held. Silas Creed sat on the steps, his leg wrapped tight, the pain dull now, like an old friend refusing to leave. Beside him, Moses kept watch with the Winchester laid across his lap, eyes sharp in a way no boy's eyes should be. Ezra slept curled up on a sack of grain behind them, arms around Jonah, whose forehead bore a bruise the shape of a boot heel. Micah whimpered in his sleep, nestled against Naomi, who hadn't rested since dusk. They'd won, though no one said it. Not yet. Victor didn't feel like a cheer. It felt like silence, thick and uncertain. Strickland's body lay a few paces from the trough, twisted like a dropped marionette. One of the twins had covered him with a horse blanket. Silas hadn't asked which. The sheriff arrived well after sunrise, riding slow and alone, hat pulled low as if ashamed to meet the day. He dismounted without speaking and surveyed the damage, his jaw tight beneath a week's worth of stubble. Naomi stepped out from the barn with a bucket of water. Her dress was stained with blood and soot, her arms cut and bruised, but her gaze held firm. "You're late," she said. The sheriff looked at the corpses, at the ruined barn, at Silas on the porch. "Heard the noise. Figured by the time I got here, there'd be nothing left to fix." "There ain't," Silas muttered. The sheriff walked slow to Strickland's body, lifted the blanket, then let it fall back. "You fire first?" he asked. Silas met his eyes. "Only shot." The sheriff nodded. "Then it's self-defense." And that was that. He left without asking another question. The dust from his horse hanging in the morning like the last line of a sermon. Later, they buried the dead out by the old cottonwood. Silas insisted they dig deep proper, not for the men's sake, but because shallow graves don't hold peace. The boys didn't speak much that day. They worked hard, solemn and focused, like they understood the weight of laying evil down in the ground. Naomi said a few words that weren't prayers, but felt like them. The wind didn't howl. It just listened. By evening, the house smelled of food again. Naomi stood at the stove, sleeves rolled high, stirring beans and corn like she'd done it all her life. Ezra played a slow hymn on the harmonica. The twins shared a blanket on the floor, drawing pictures in charcoal on scraps of crate wood. Micah chased a moth with a stick, giggling. Silas leaned against the doorframe, one crutch on his arm, his injured leg bound and stiff. He watched them not like an outsider, but like a man who couldn't quite believe he was still part of the world. Naomi turned to him, eyes soft but steady. "You're going to need help if you want that field ready by fall." He nodded, was thinking the same. "I could take the north line with Moses," she said. "He's strong enough now. Boy nearly carried me across the yard last night. I'd trust him with the plow." Moses didn't smile at the praise. He just nodded once and went back to sanding the rifle stock, slow and careful. Later, as the stars blinked awake, Silas stepped onto the porch with Moses. They stood side by side in the cooling dark, both quiet for a long while. "I used to think this land didn't want me," Silas said. "That was just biding time till it buried me." Moses said nothing. But now, Silas looked out across the scorched fields, the new graves, the still-standing barn. Now it feels different, like it might be waiting for something else. Moses lowered his gaze. "We were never meant to stay nowhere long. You can stay here. That what you want?" Silas turned to him. "Don't matter what I want. You're already here, and you didn't run." Moses finally met his eyes. "If we stay, what are we?" Silas breathed in the warm air, thick with dirt, smoke, and the faint sweetness of evening jasmine. "We're what's left, and maybe that's enough." The boy's lips pressed together. He shifted his weight, like something was heavy in his chest. "Micah called you Pa," Moses said. Silas blinked, surprised. "I heard. You mind it?" Silas looked out again, toward the hills glowing orange in the last light. "No, I don't mind it." Moses nodded once, then stepped off the porch into the yard where fireflies had begun to flicker. "I think Mom might let me build a house over yonder someday," he said, pointing toward a gentle rise near the creek. "You won't need to ask," Silas said. The boy paused and smiled, just a flicker, like a candle lit in a church long abandoned. Inside the house, Naomi called softly, "Supper's on." Moses ran ahead. Silas followed slower, each step echoing louder than the last. And as the door shut behind them, the prairie exhaled. No gunfire, no weeping, only the hush of wind through the grass, and the whisper of a new name being born.